Hi, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all those who are participating into this exciting webinar. Happy Eid to all of those who were celebrating it last week, and I wish that you had a happy and safe Eid during this pandemic and events that we're having and we're living in. My name is Mohammed Ayoub. I'm the Regional Growth Leader for GE Grid Solutions, part of GE Renewables, board member of CEPC, Clean Energy Business Council, and Chief Sustainability Officers at Diamond Developers. I lead the Energy Storage Working Group as part of the CEPC Clean Energy Business Council. Today, actually, I'll be your moderator to this webinar on the future of energy storage in MENA region. And we are bringing to you a group of phenomenal speakers and industry experts who will be taking you through various topics related to this emerging dynamics of the energy storage business globally and within the region. The webinar is brought to you in partnership between CEPC, Clean Energy Business Council, which is a non-profit organization dedicated to promote clean energy, including renewables, energy efficiency, smart grid energy storage, electric mobility, and climate finance. And DII, Desert Energy, which is an independent international public-private sector network operating from Dubai, focusing on emerging energies and energy storage, as well as the International Battery and Energy Storage Alliance, which is the International Battery and Energy Storage Alliance, EPCs, which is the first international network of excellence in the field of battery and energy storage that enables an international and practice-oriented transfer of technology and knowledge in this field. Energy storage is one of the hottest topics within the energy industry, and it has seen major milestones over the past 2 decades. The technology is becoming more robust, it's becoming much more feasible in terms of cost, and it's further spread across different industries and applications. We see it in everything that we do in our daily life, from grid to mobility to even the mobiles that we're using in our mobile phones or even in our laptop. Let's not wait for too long and jump directly into the event. As I mentioned, we're bringing phenomenal speaker to this, and we'll start with an opening statement from Dr. Nasser Saidi, Chairman of the Clean Energy Business Council. Dr. Nasser.
Thank you, Mohammed, and welcome everybody. As Mohammed was saying, I mean, this is a very exciting moment for renewable energy in general, and particularly, of course, for energy storage. If you go back to the basics, the problem we've always faced with intermittency of renewable energy is that it is not reliable. You need to have reliability. You need to reach 100% reliability. And of course, energy storage is the main weapon, is the main instrument that you use for achieving that. But also, I think we need to understand that energy storage is ubiquitous. You can use it for renewable energy, but you can also use it for fossil fuel or any other form of energy. And the importance of that, of course, is that you can also deploy it in multiple uses. And because it's ubiquitous, it means that you can use it for distribution, for generation, and for transmission. And therefore, it is transformational as well for the energy industry itself. And of course, it's going to mean that we're going to gradually revolutionize electronics. I mean, mobile phones was just mentioned. They could become much smaller, for example. The transport systems, which are main users of energy, will also be transformed given the ability, particularly of battery storage and the reducing cost of doing so. The turbine industry as well. So this ubiquitous aspect of energy storage is, I think, an important component. And because it's ubiquitous, we're going to need a market, and I'll come back to that in a second. The second point, critical whenever you're developing any industry, and particularly when it's competing, is the costs. And here, what has happened in terms of technology is amazing. If you look at the cost back in 2010, it was over $1,100 per kilowatt hour, yeah, for battery storage. The latest numbers from that we know is that by 2020 we're talking about $137 per kilowatt hour. But it's gone much further than that. If you look at some of the reports coming out of China, for electronic buses in China, the cost has gone down to about $100 per kilowatt hour. That is amazing, because it means if these cost reductions continue, and they are likely to, given the enormous resources which are going into research and development and the battery energy industry, you're likely to see very easily about $101, $102 by 2023, and perhaps even by 2022. What that means, of course, is you reach the threshold whereby electric vehicles are now can enter the mass market. They'll become directly competitive, even without subsidies, with fossil fuel or internal combustion engines. So the issue of costs, I think, is a major one that we need to look at. It means that technology increasingly is going to be driving the energy storage industry. So, and that itself is also changing. So we'll gradually move away from lithium-based batteries to maybe other materials, and eventually towards solid state. And the reason why that becomes important is that you don't need to pack as much energy into a given volume, and that means you have some less danger of explosion and fires arising, as we've seen in some cases in electric cars. The third point, I think, concerns us in the MENA region. It's very clear that the MENA region, starting with UAE and now increasingly Saudi and the other markets, other GCC countries, are massively going into an energy transmission and energy transition where they're increasingly adopting renewable energy. And the region, of course, has a comparative advantage in solar power, given its wide availability throughout the year. And as the region does that, energy storage becomes more and more important as you effect this transition. What does that mean? It means several things. It means that for the industry itself, for the battery storage industry, this is going to be one of the most important markets in the world. So you'll need to think about how you want to approach the market, how you want to develop the market. So I just point to that because there are billions now going into the renewable energy, particularly solar, across the region, and you need to accompany that. And battery storage at the moment is really in its infancy in terms of energy production, transmission in the region. And its importance is that if you look across the region, you don't only have the big countries, you also have great distances, right? Within a Saudi Arabia or any of the countries, you've got deserts. And therefore, the availability of energy storage, battery storage, becomes more and more important given these big distances. And of course, it also means that this industry is likely to play an important role in economic development. You don't need to set up national grids all over, yeah? You can reduce them. So digitized energy storage solutions are going to become more important, particularly across the MENA region. But there's a direct implication of that. The direct implication of that is that we need markets. And at the moment, we don't have markets. The only country which is thinking of a spot market for energy, has started the spot market for energy, is Oman. We'll need to work together, all of us, and that's why CBC is important. It brings these various players together in order to create a market. We'll need to be integrating the grids across the GCC countries. We won't be able to benefit a lot from the efficiencies and the lower costs of battery storage if each country continues developing its own grid and increasing capacity without linking those grids. But as soon as you talk about linking those grids, it means you have to create a market and pricing for electricity, and you need to integrate battery storage or energy storage. So one of the things I think that we all need to focus on is those two things: creating a market, creating an institutional framework, but also being very active at removing fossil fuel subsidies. It is a warning I always make. As long as you continue having fossil fuel subsidies across the GCC countries, you don't have a level playing field. In order to get a level playing field, you've got to act on removing those subsidies. So removing subsidies, working together to develop a market, integrating GCC grids, and then we'll be able to export across the region. And of course, battery storage will play an increasingly important part. So very clearly, extremely promising across a whole range of industries, or across a whole range of applications. So I'm very pleased that you have industry participants, you have people who are making the market happen. So thank you very much for joining us, and we look forward to working with you across the MENA region as a CEBC. And also, of course, this is an invitation for you to join as members of the CEBC and therefore network with us. So thank you very much for this session, Muhammad, and all the organizers. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Dr. Nasser. Really appreciating it. Removing subsidies, having the policies that will a market for energy storage and enable larger benefits from deploying the storage from one country to another. I think these are some of the things that we will be discussing in the following topics. Our next speaker is Mr. Cornelis Mathis. He's the Chief Executive Officer of DII Desert Energy. Thanks a lot for joining us, Dr. Cornelis, and please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mohammed, and hello, everybody. It's a wonderful partnership together with our colleagues from the CEBC and the Battery and Energy Storage Alliance, Daniel joining from Germany. These kind of partnerships, you know, they're really crucial to make things happen. I would like to briefly go back a bit in time during my remarks. We had a bit more than 10 years ago the Storage Working Group 1.0 in DII, which was feeding into Desert Power 2050, ultimately published in 2012. And there we looked at thermal storage. At the time, CSP would have thought to play a much larger role. PV turned out to be the massive success story, and not CSP during the last decade, which was quite interesting. We looked at the potential role of storage, and actually we found that connecting the Europe, Middle East, North Africa region, there is not a very large role of storage as many people thought. The main factor actually at the time, and it is still valid today, is really connecting different markets, electrical interconnections, HVDC lines. So a market, like countries like Germany, balancing out and using other countries and vice versa, as a battery, balancing grids. So this is still today extremely important. I think the decade has been so exciting because, as Dr. Nasser said, the price for batteries have come down so massively. We've had a reload, a working group storage 2.0 in DII in 2018, 2019. We found that clearly the main prerequisite here for, let's say, a significant uptake of storage is still the absence of markets, and that's also, the topic we are trying to contribute a little bit. Dr. Nasser was pointing out on this. Markets are obviously crucial, apart from connecting, with interconnections, different power grids. But you know, some of the findings that were quite interesting. I'm very glad that one of our advisory board members, Antonio, he's, you know, alongside CEOs of Aqua Power or Masa on our board, and did great work on this. And I'm glad he will speak today on some of these findings and, you know, more recent developments, and also with the view on Europe. But also Dr. Imran from MENA, where at the time, you know, we included practical applications, and we looked at what really today is happening in storage. And Enaware has been the pioneer, you know, in deploying storage for off-grid. Has been the first to deploy Tesla batteries here in the region, for example. So I'm glad you're here. I think it will be really an interesting discussion. Now, one thing I would like to add is that energy storage is obviously a vast field. So while we are talking about you know, thermal, mechanical storage, obviously still the majority today is pump storage, and even in Hatta in Dubai, you know, a pump storage project of significant size is being built. There's much more. There is obviously flexible demand is important. The district cooling systems today have significant cold and ice storage capabilities. This could be even an existing form of storage. This could even be, you know, used for power arbitrage, and DI is actually looking at this. But much more importantly, in the last few years, the topic of green molecules came here on the horizon, and all of a sudden everybody's talking about green hydrogen. But this really changed the whole picture dramatically, because green molecules is an enabler, a massive enabler for the global energy transition. You know, to integrate more, quicker renewables, seasonal storage. Green molecules are absolutely not competing with green electrons. They're absolutely complementary. You know, a prerequisite for green molecules is, in fact, green electrons, and this will drive the market much faster. There is seasonal storage and underground formation, for example, or even in depleted oil and gas fields, which is also for the region quite interesting. And this topic of green molecules, you know, is really the core of Desertec 3.0 together with green electrons, this mission. And so we are pleased, you know, that today we are in a great position to jointly drive the energy transition. The prices are there, the technologies are there, and also in terms of exchanging huge amounts of energy between markets, green molecules offers another and a major opportunity to exchange not only gigawatts but tens of gigawatts of capacity between the markets. So in this sense, I'm delighted that we come together today and for sure have a very exciting discussion. And back to you, Mohammed, and wishing you all an interesting and exciting show today.
Thanks a lot, Cornelius. I do agree 100%. It's not only policies, it's different technologies of energy storage, and each one would have its own unique sweet spot within servicing the overall industries. Thanks, Cornelius, for this opening remarks. Next on our agenda is Mr. Daniel Fox. He's the Vice President, International Battery and Energy Storage Organization. Mr. Daniel, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Also on behalf of the International Battery and Energy Storage Alliance, a warm welcome to all attendees. We are thrilled about the cooperation with CEBC and DII and look forward to a great conference today. Before we kick off the program, please allow me to share a few words on our company. Having taken the global lead in energy storage research and networking back in 2013, IBESA is the first alliance of excellence in the field of battery and energy storage that enables an international and practice-oriented transfer of knowledge. IBESA offers a worldwide network, contacts along the value chain of different business sectors, exclusive high-quality market research knowledge, as well as the complete marketing and public relation package, based on a long experience in business. By connecting key stakeholders along the entire value chain, IBESA enables companies of all sizes to directly communicate with relevant target groups. Here, market intermediaries like installers, project developers, EPCs, and wholesalers are in the limelight. With continuously surging demand for energy storage solutions all over the world, IBESA is heavily growing as well. We know where the future markets are. Our service and know-how is your business advantage tomorrow. Now enough from my side. Please sit back, relax, and enjoy today's conference. Thank you very much once again, and handing over to Mohammed.
Thanks a lot, Daniel. And now, guys, let's start our discussion with the first presentation that we will be having on the IRENA electricity storage valuation framework. IRENA is playing a major role in setting up the framework for advancing the energy storage within the globe and within the region. Our next presenter is going to be Mr. Carlos Fernandez. He's the Associate Professional in Power Systems Flexibility at IRENA. Carlos is bringing huge experience on this topic, and looking forward to his presentation on the IRENA electricity storage valuation framework. Go ahead, Carlos, the floor is yours.
Yep, thank you very much. Well, first of all, I would like to thank the Clean Energy Business Council, the DI, Desert Energy, and IBESA for the organization of this great event. So, as Mohammed said, my name is Carlos Fernandez. I work in the power sector transformation team in IRENA. And today I will be presenting you what we call the IRENA electricity storage valuation framework. Given the time constraints, I will just be providing a brief overview, but there's a lot of detail. Last year in March 2020, we published a full report that is composed of 3 parts. The first part is what I will talk about today, which is an overview of policymakers. The second part, if someone is interested, talks more in detail about the methodology and how to use power sector models in order to better value storage in power grids. And then there's other part, which presents a set of 8 electricity storage use cases with real examples of projects that have been installed around the world. Well, before going into storage itself, I would like to present you the scenario just released by our IRENA remap team in the World Energy Transition Outlook, which presents a pathway that we could follow in order to keep the temperature below 1.5 degrees. So this is the 1.5 IRENA scenario, and it basically says that by 2050, the power sector will have a generation, renewables will have a 90% generation share, from which 63% will be solar photovoltaics and winds. As some of the initial speakers have already said, the issue with solar PV and wind is that they are variable and they are uncertain, and they could pose a challenge to the power sector. So we need to enhance system flexibility in order to operate the power sector in a safe way. In this case, one of the key solutions could be electricity storage, although there's also we also have to look at demand side flexibility or distribution and transmission network. This is a bit what we want to show on the right hand side. So up to today, flexibility has been found in the supply side. So generators were adapting to a non-flexible demand, and now what we have to do is to seek that flexibility in all parts of the power sector, not only in the supply side, also on grids and also on demand with the help of storage. So what is the role of electricity storage for VRE integration? So what we think is that electricity storage, depending on the technology we consider, can support VRE integration in all timescales. If we look at the very short-term timescales, we have services like the provision of inertia, where We have technologies like flywheels or even batteries with synthetic inertia being able to provide it. If we go to a long duration storage, we have the big pump hydro power plants, and if we go to a monthly or even annual duration storage, we can even go to hydrogen storage. When we collocate the storage with VRE, it has direct benefits, like increasing firm capacity or reducing variability or uncertainty, what is also known as VRE smoothing. And when we install storage as a standalone system, it has also benefits for VRE. These are indirect benefits, like reducing the operational impact of these technologies, deferring other investments, like investment in peaking power plants or in grids, or increasing efficiency of the system. So what is the storage valuation framework? The storage valuation framework is basically a 5-step methodology that we developed in order to better assess the value of electricity storage in power systems, and also to ensure project viability. The framework is composed of 5 steps. The first 2 are more qualitative. The last 3 are more quantitative and require expertise in modeling tools. And basically, what we do is in phase 1, we identify a set of power sector services that the storage could potentially provide. In here, we can have operational reserves, energy arbitrage, transmission and distribution deferral, and some other services. Then once we've done that, we map these services with the different storage technologies existing to see which technology could be more suitable to provide one service or another. These are the 2 qualitative steps. Then on phase 3, we go to the quantitative phase, which is analyzing the value of electricity storage in the power system as a whole. So here we use capacity expansion and dispatch models, and we iterate with each other in order to see what will be the total value of installing electricity storage in the power sector. We don't look at a specific project, we just check whether there's some value in installing a storage. Once this is done, we go to the project level site, and taking into account a specific project, we simulate how the project will operate in the system of a study. With that, we will get some revenues, we will get some costs, and we will be able to assess the viability of the project. The problem of electricity storage projects and assessing the viability of the project is what we call the missing money problem. And this is a bit something what we try to address with the evaluation framework. So in many cases, when we analyze the value of a storage project in the system, we come up with this storage project being very beneficial for the power system. So in this example, which is not a real example, but just to illustrate, we have a storage project that produces $70 million savings into the power system in which it's installed. Then in the second column, we see the project costs. And then in the third column, we see the actual revenues that the project is making given the market and the regulations in that specific power system we are studying. So the problem we have here is that we have a storage project that is very beneficial for the system, but there are not market instruments for the storage project to monetize this system value. So this is something that policymakers and regulators should try to address to make storage beneficial and foster investment of storage projects into the system. So some recommendations that we provide once we finalize the storage framework and for different stakeholders are as follows. So for electricity storage developers, we would recommend to get familiar with existing business model and collaborate closer with regulators and utilities to highlight the benefits of storage. For vertical integrated utilities, we will recommend to update planning tools to include the storage and update procurement processes for services required. For regulators, the idea is that they can eliminate barriers for storage participation in different markets, create new markets, and make incorporation of least cost planning for storage. And finally, there's a very important role of the research community who should support the further development of tools and methodologies to perform storage valuation. Just to finalize, and I'll be quickly, given the time limits, as I mentioned at the beginning, we also checked many case studies around the world of storage projects that are providing different services, and we divided them in 8 use cases. I'm presenting here 2 of them that maybe could be useful. One of them is storage providing operating reserves. Here it's interesting to observe how some power systems or system operators around the world have created new ancillary services, like in the case of UK, in order for storage in order to foster storage participation in these markets. So the UK created the enhanced frequency response product, and they did an auction for technologies to provide these services, and right now many storage projects are providing enhanced frequency response. Then another possible use case of electricity storage, a very useful one actually, is the reduced peaking plant capital savings. So storage, by providing peak saving, can avoid the installation of peaking power plants like natural gas turbines or CCGTs that will be otherwise underutilized. So for this, the regulators have different tools like the security of supply mechanisms or the capacity markets, in order to where they can include storage participation or demand side flexibility participation in order to foster investments on storage. We've seen already the UK capacity markets, the new Italian capacity markets as examples of capacity mechanisms that are including other technologies besides conventional generation. So just to conclude, we've seen that storage supports VR integration, and its large-scale deployments can provide considerable benefits to the system. However, storage deployment will not happen if there's a missing money problem. So if the system benefits are way higher than the project revenues, and the project revenues cannot beat the project costs, storage will not be installed. So it's regulators and policymakers should do some restructuring and policy support in order to make these system benefits monetizable. And then I've presented the storage methodology, where power sector models and a techno-economic comparison of the storage with other options is key in order to assess the system value of these technologies in a specific power system. So I think this was all. If there's enough time, I will be happy to take questions. Otherwise, here is my email, and you can contact me for any questions regarding this. So thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Carlos. I think this was a great overview about how the coordination can really monetize the missing money that you mentioned. And IRENA plays a major role in ensuring that the public-private collaboration is done in the most optimum way to maximize the benefits and ensure that our efforts towards a cleaner energy, a cleaner deployment of energy storage is done within the right framework. I really appreciate the case studies that you brought, because they're really valuable especially the one on reduction of the spinning reserve. Couple of things that I wanted to highlight for all of our audience. Please feel free to raise the questions as it is. You can see them on the right panels under questions, and you can log in your questions, and we will be answering those questions if we're having time. Session. With that, thanks again, Carlos, Associate Professional Power Systems Flexibility from IRENA, for all of these informations. And let's move to our next session within our agenda today. And the next session is gonna be Parag Pamre, a partner at EPCs, who will be walking us through a topic on various energy storage related techniques and technologies. So please go ahead, Parag. Thanks a lot for joining us, and looking forward for your input. Thanks.
Thank you, Mohammed, for that kind introduction. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. As Mohammed mentioned, my name is Parag Pamre, and I'm a partner at the International Battery and Energy Storage Alliance. Today, I just wanted to speak to you a little bit about energy storage and why we feel that this is really the holy grail of all emerging energy technologies. But before I jump into my presentation, I want to just add a few words to what Daniel spoke about the International Battery and Energy Storage Alliance. So IBESA is a global network of all energy storage industry, various stakeholders across the globe. We essentially act as a business accelerator, and we are really present across 4 different continents. Our major goal is to connect various stakeholders and to proactively pave way for future business. As our partners, we provide them with targeted focused group supports, including webinars, business matchmaking services, and even lead generation. And our partners are automatically presented at major industry events which IBESA organizes or are co-organizers for in various parts of the world. Here are some of our proud partners. Just to name a few, they're major storage companies who are with us. And over the last 10 years or so, we've actually conducted more than 200 events across 38 locations and 18 countries. Now, having told you a little bit about IBESA, I want to jump into my presentation and talk a little bit about what are the major energy storage market drivers. So, as we are in 2021, we're seeing a profound change with the advent of renewable energies. 2 major things that we are noticing. One are the electricity generation sources are changing rapidly. And second, we are seeing an increase in electricity demand, be it due to use of electric vehicles, which is going to come in, and electrification of supply of heat and cooling in different parts of the world. In 2021, we expect the overall CO2 emissions to rise. We say that is because 2020 was a special year where the total emissions dropped due to the COVID-19 pandemic, but we expect these CO2 emissions to rise in 2021. But in order to counter this, we are also seeing a huge growth in renewable energies. In the year 2020, the total renewable energy production accounted for approximately 29% of the total generation mix globally. And when we look at what has really happened and how we've got here, in the past 20 years or so, we've seen a change in the electricity generation by sources. So when we compare the year 2000 and 2019, we see that a certain percentage of coal was added to the total electricity mix. Gas was also added to the electricity mix over the last 20 years or so. But we have seen substantial growth in wind as well as photovoltaics. So in terms of addition of renewable energy capacities, we've started seeing the growth uptake in the last 20 years or so. But what's going to happen in the next 20 years, according to the stated policy scenarios, is that we're going to see a complete shift from coal to wind and solar photovoltaics. This is primarily because the costs of both these technologies have come down drastically over the last years. And if we were to take into consideration the sustainable development scenario, where we were to achieve the targets of the various countries, we're definitely going to see an exponential growth in the capacity additions of both wind and solar. On the other hand, what we are definitely going to see is a substantial reduction in the amount of coal-fired power plants, and also to a certain extent, natural gas. What this means for solar photovoltaics is that from the year 2019 till the year 2040, we expect that the total increase in annual production from solar photovoltaics will increase 12-fold. So this is going to be a huge increase for solar photovoltaics in the next decade or two. When we look at the total accumulated installed capacity of solar photovoltaics, this has increased since the year 2015. And this is a momentum which we expect, or which I just showed you, will continue till the end of 2040 for sure. So at the end of 2020, we saw that there was a total cumulated installed capacity of 720 gigawatts globally. Now, coming to the energy storage part, I want to present the case of energy storage by taking the example of Germany. Now, as we've seen that there has been a significant share of fluctuating renewable energy sources which have been added in the past decade, and what is going to continue in the next decade or two, we feel that storage will play a major role in the energy system. And in the subsequent slides, I want to take this example of Germany to show you what issues the high share of renewables is going to bring into the electricity system, and how storage can really help. So what Germany has declared is that by the year 2022, they are going to phase out all the nuclear power plants in Germany. So what you see in pink here is the nuclear capacity, which will be phased out by the year 2022. What they have also announced is that they will be phasing out all the coal-fired power plants by the year 2038. And what this in turn is going to do is that although the demand for electricity is going to increase, this is going to be coming all from wind and solar in the next couple of decades. So solar and wind will really become the key drivers in the energy transition. Now, when we look at an example or a calendar week from the year 2018, the case was that nuclear and coal really form the basis of the base load generation, or the base load for electricity system in Germany. And whenever you had high amounts of renewable energy being fed into the grid, this was taken care by reducing the amount of fossil fuel powered plants. So the amount of electricity generation from these fossil fuel power plants was sort of reduced in order to meet the demand. So when we look at the electricity generation of the entire country and the load curve, this pretty much matched, and this was fairly straightforward for the electricity operators. However, when we talk about 2030, the overall load is going to increase, the demand for electricity is going to increase, but then so is the electricity generation from the PV systems and wind energy. So when you see the overlap, which was a commonplace in 2018, this might not so be the case in the year 2020. And you will have certain peaks of electricity generation during the course of the day or during the course of a season, which will require you to store all of this energy in order to use it for a later point in time. So what's really going to happen is that in the year 2030, if you were to take a calendar week, you do not have that baseload generation which was coming from nuclear or from coal. And in that particular case, what you will have to do is that in order to integrate all of this renewable energy from solar and from wind, you will have to ensure that the electricity which is generated and the excess electricity gets stored and is reconverted when it's absolutely required, when the wind is not blowing or the sun is not shining. So this really is what is going to be required, and this is essentially where energy storage will play a key role. Now, coming to the concept of residual load. So residual load actually refers to the demand load in the grid after subtracting the electricity generated by the fluctuating energy sources such as wind or photovoltaics. So keep this definition in mind so that I can explain the next few slides. Now, when we talk about the residual load in 2018, there were a few days in Germany when wind energy and solar photovoltaics were able to cover nearly 100% of the demand. So these were far in between, but nevertheless, Germany was able to get to 100% renewables on specific days. However, in the year 2030, if our prognosis is right and there is rapid development of solar photovoltaics and wind energy, on a windless night, the electricity demand might just shoot up extremely, whereas on certain sunny days, there will be excess electricity within the grid. And this fluctuation really will create all the sort of problems that we've been talking about. And this is essentially where energy storage will come into picture. Now, this will not only happen on a daily basis, but on a seasonal basis also. We expect that during winter months, the demand for electricity will be much higher than what the renewable energy sources can produce. Whereas in summer months, there will be excess electricity generation from photovoltaics, which we will have to store or use it in another season. So there are several different applications which will come into force, and primarily due to such intermittency of renewable energy, storage technologies will play a crucial role in the future. Now, as Carlos mentioned, there are several applications for energy storage at the moment which are being developed, and I've just tried to highlight some here. Some of these applications are definitely going to be used to directly support integration of variable renewable energy into the grid. This could be related to time shift. This could be related to power reliability, and so on and so forth. So there are several applications which are being developed depending on the use case in the various countries, the requirements in those particular countries. We're confident that renewable energy variations will definitely be countered with the use of energy storage. To conclude, I would like to say that globally, we know that the share of renewable energies will only rise over the next decades. Wind and solar PV will definitely play a major role in the electricity generation, and storage will really be the key to a lot of this integration into the electricity grid. There are several applications which are in place and being developed. However, we feel that the interplay of all of these solutions will bring about a balance in the electricity system, which will really be the key to the energy transition. Thank you very much. In case you have any questions, please feel free to write to me, or I'm more than happy to take your question.
Thanks a lot, Parag. I think this was really good in overviewing the rise of renewables into the energy mix and the importance of energy storage into that mix. Again, guys, I'm reminding you, if there is any questions, you can write those into the webinar tool on the right-hand side. Please feel free to raise your questions. And our next topic, it's gonna be a panel discussion about storage market development in MENA and case studies from the world. This is a panel of various experts who are coming from various companies, leading companies in this field, as well as organizations. And the panelist, the moderator for the panel is Mr. Florian Meyer. He's a partner at APRICOM, the Clean Tech Advisory. Mr. Florian is coming to us with a rich experience in the energy storage field, with various experiences in a couple of consultancies, as well as with APRICOM on supporting clients in creating markets for energy storage related technologies. With that, I think, Florian, you can give an introduction to the panel and introduce the panelists that you're having. And guys, again, please raise any question that you're having into the question session, and we'll be able to squeeze those questions and provide you with answers. Go ahead, Florian.
Yeah, thank you very much for this kind introduction, and also welcome from my end to this upcoming session on energy storage market development in MENA and case studies around the world. Yeah, as you just heard, I'm heading our activities in energy storage, and I'm therefore involved in all kinds of storage-related projects around the world. And I have to say, it's really quite an exciting place to be in these days. Following already some quite impressive growth rates in the last years, the global market for energy storage is set to really explode in this decade, from 27 gigawatt hours in 2020 up 27-fold to 730 gigawatt hours by 2030. And main driving countries of the boom today are, I have to say, the usual suspects, including USA, China, Western Europe, and to a certain extent also India, Australia, South Korea, and Japan. But also the MENA region offers the key ingredients of a successful energy storage market that are already in place or will be soon. And I would in particular mention that it was already also noted before, obviously the rapidly growing share of renewable energy in the generation mix all across the MENA region, which results in an increasing need for flexibility that energy storage can provide. And also an increasing competitiveness of energy storage to alternatives to provide this flexibility when it comes to environmental footprint and also cost-wise. Although the latter is still suffering from subsidies for fossil fuels, which are still pretty dominant in the region. And there are also positive developments in market and regulatory frameworks, as we have also heard from the previous speakers, that are necessary to get access and not also actually get paid for the merits storage can add. So consequently, all in all, despite some challenges that remain to be overcome, opportunities for storage exist, and the MENA region certainly bears the potential to contribute its share to this decade of energy storage, as I like to call it, that has just commenced. So in this session, we will speak about the wide array of value energy storage can provide along the power systems of the region, distributed and central, as well as on-grid and off-grid. Our speakers will share their vast experience on successful energy storage projects, the challenges to overcome, the future trends, and what it will take to make the MENA region the next hot energy storage market. So with that, I would like to introduce our first speaker of today, and this is Antonio Ilisetto. Since 2001, Antonio is with Terna Rete Italia, the TSO of Italy. And I followed Terna's activities in the last years, and I think it's fair to say that they are a pioneer in trying out energy storage in various pilot projects in Italy. And Antonio focuses on R&D and innovation at Terna, but also in the context of EU projects and bodies such as ENTSO-E. And currently is engaged in works on global grid, sector integration, electric vehicles, and hydrogen. And he's active in a wide range of bodies such as MET, TSO, DII, but today he is sailing under the flag of CIGRE, where he chairs the study committee System Development and Economics, and is a member of the Technical Council and contributed to several working groups on sector coupling, again, hydrogen, resilience, interconnections assessments, global grid, and African electrification. So based on this impressive background, it's not surprising, I think, that Antonio will tell us all about the impact of storage and battery use cases on the power grid, to which I'm very much looking forward. So Antonio, stage is yours.
Thank you very much, Florian. Can you see my screen? I'm not sure. The cover of the presentation. Hello?
Yes, we can. Yes, we can, Antonio.
Thank you for inviting me here. I'm a not so young engineer, and I remember when I was studying electrical engineer, they were telling us electricity is almost the perfect way of using energy, except that it cannot be stored. So it's very nice now to be here and talk about how it can be stored very well and very well used for the energy transition. I will briefly go through these ideas why the power system needs storage. I will bring especially the system point of view, the transmission system point of view, and which storage is more suitable for which application. This we have already seen actually from previous presentations, in particular with a focus on electrochemical storage batteries, which is not the only type of storage, but is the most important one. And I will give some example from outside MENA, but closely Europe, Italy. And then I think we will have some question and debate about applicability in MENA. So actually, it's good, Parag, that you introduced the residual load profile concept. This is something we are working every day, dispatching at transmission system operators. We are really going to a paradigm shift. It's not just a way of saying. We had until a few years ago a load which is given as an external exogenous variable. So let's call it inflexible load. And we have a lot of generation which is modulable, hydro, and thermal, and so we just have the generation follows load. This is the operating philosophy. Today, we have this residual load profile, which poses the problems we have already seen, especially during daytime, we have an excess of generation and a ramp in the evening. This is also very challenging for a system operation, which is becoming steeper and steeper. And in the future, this will be even worse. So you see this classic duck figure, they call it like this in California, which means that these two trends are every year are going more and more to be a sort of a problem. So we will have in the end a sort of inflexible generation. Inflexible, why? Because this is zero cost, so it's really pity to curtail it, to throw it away. We should follow with the load and the grid and all the other flexibility measures what is the pattern of the load. So it's a totally turnaround of the operating philosophy. And we are doing still this with mostly the same resources and mostly the same engineers. Some new young are coming on the scene, but I mean, we have to do this in few years, not in centuries, as it could have been in previous cases. Fortunately, we have a lot of flexibility means available. So not only storage, not only a demand response, we still have, and first at our hand, as system operator, we have some element of the grids which are flexible by definition, and we are installing more and more flexible elements, as well as we are going to extend the use. This is called also smart grid way of using existing components, stretching their capabilities and their possibilities, not having too much reserve prudence when we use, for example, the thermal limit, which is 1 per year. Now we can have a dynamic way of using the components. Then we have interconnections, because we can shift energy from one area to another one. Then we still rely a lot on the flexible generation, because the thermal one has also done some big steps in modulation, so enhancing the ramp, and the response speed, the capability range. And then we are looking very much at making more flexible some of the loads. Not they should reply to price signals. So we have demand response. We have the classic interruptible customers, which act as a powerful way to avoid interrupting those who don't want to be interrupted. These ones are some which are paid and are accepted to be interrupted. And then we will have more and more aggregation and services, like, for example, the smart charging of electric vehicles instead of passive one. If we make hundreds of millions of vehicles, we will have in a few years from now to be charged in a smart way. This will be a powerful mean for us, a win-win solution, because they will save money and the system will also save money. And then we have storage. So it's last, but of course not least. Storage has a lot of options inside it, and I like to split it in storage which is still within the control or the direct interaction of grid operators, which is all what is electrochemical, but also other means of storing which are devoted only to power service. And so flywheels and other, including of course the pump hydro, and in this case vehicle to grid. So if we go from smart charging to bidirectional charging, we can use the batteries of them as if it was a huge aggregate of small batteries. And then in the end, we will go to storage in other energy system, which is also presenting a huge kind of opportunities, but with a caveat, a warning that when we convert energy in another form, this does not become automatically electricity gain, like for electrochemical batteries. And we have to cope with other sectors who have other needs, other operators, other users. So if we have some mapping, actually what is the main challenge for system operator is that we have to best use and best combine all these many flexibility means with the aim to maximize the integration of renewable generation, because this is an unavoidable trend, and all of them have zero or quasi zero variable costs. So we have to be very smart in using the best combination, which is not the only one solution. It depends on time, depends on location, it depends on boundary condition. And this is coming now at operation stage. It will also arrive at planning stage. We are trying now to plan the grids in order to consider the possibilities and the capabilities which are coming from all these flexibility means, which sometimes turns out to be we plan the grid as no doing any investment on the grid, because we can have no wire solution. So it seems strange, but the grid operator can also plan a no grid, a no wire solution. And you can find on the literature many of these classification of storage. The main criteria for classification is the power they can reach, because if you see here on the left side of the page, when we have little times of discharge and little power rating, this is very useful for short term and like frequency and other grid services. These are services to keep up the grid. When we go to the opposite side, on the high part, on the right high part near the pump hydro, for example, this is more a service to the system as a whole. So it's not only anymore a decision of grid operators. We have to see all the other stakeholders of the system. So we can see this, which has been shown already. We have many different services which can be provided by the storage, going from bulk energy services to the system, to grid services, ancillary services. Some are specific to transmission, some are specific to distribution, and then there is a whole interesting sector about customer services, which goes from power quality to increase the self-consumption in case of prosumers. You can have different taxonomies of storage. This is not looking at the future, as most of the graphic we've seen until now. It is what is existing now. So it's interesting to see that the different kind of storage that we have today are actually mostly focused on a typical service. Just to say the most important ones, pump hydro is mostly for electric energy time shift. This is done on a daily or weekly basis, while electrochemical, which is of course not comparable, we're talking about 2 gigawatt against 170, but in relative terms, you see that this is very much used and useful also in the future for frequency regulation. While if we go to electromechanical, this is more for on-site power, and for sector coupling, for example, thermal storage, one out of many. This is used mainly for co-optimizing different services like district heating, for example. We made with the DII, I'm collaborating with DII, this was mentioned by Cornelius, a study we together with Arthur De Little. The title is Battery Storage is Middle East Ready Yet? So it's not old, it's less than 2 years ago, and it was exactly focused on the same topic of today's workshop. And here we have studied some also both business models, but also the different services which are best suitable for which kind of operator. The main conclusions you can read here. First of all, that the grid scale storage for frequency regulation is today the most promising application, and depends very much on regulatory framework, and this is related to what Carlos was calling the missing money problems. But in some places maybe there is no energy market per se. This can be also a good thing, not necessarily a bad thing, because if you have one centralized way of planning, you can plan the grid, the development of renewables, and the storage in a coordinated manner. This should happen always, but when you have a market, you have to pull together a lot of different vested interests, all legitimate, of course. Another conclusion was that residential battery storage is until now limited because it has relied only on strong public support to find a positive business case. Grid operators in Europe, for example, we had an example in Italy that my company developed energy intensive and power intensive, but then European regulation doesn't allow grid operators to own and operate directly because they are seen like interfering with the market mechanism. This is something which is still has to be completely solved. In MENA, there could be opportunities from the side of integrated utilities. It could be this an advantage also using the experience of the early adopters. Island system are an example where storage is most important. In this study, we have also studied which are the potential business models in terms of who can be operating and managing the different stage of the value chain. One important thing is the battery is very scalable. It's modular, so you can go from one model to infinite modules. So this means that there are multiple applications and multiple market players. This depends again on location and on local regulation. The topic of this today workshop was also about use cases. Here, I will give some example that have been studied in Italy from the point of view of the investor. So it's really some business cases. And taking into consideration that another typical splitting is between application in front of the meter or behind the meter. And as you see, there is, for example, this Bloomberg forecast that system behind the meter will become even more dominant than in front of the meter, which is still not the case today. So just to give you some examples, batteries can be integrated with generation, not only with renewables. Also, there are examples with gas plants. In this case, they maximize the producibility and also they optimize the primary reserve, which is a mandated services, which is given for free. So instead of keeping a reserve margin on your capacity and that you cannot use to offer to the market, you can optimize playing with the battery and optimizing the sum of the two possible source of energy. A case study was performed, giving that there is the best kind of battery here is lithium battery with a limited capacity with respect to the capacity of the gas plant, and with a return on investment which is not very attractive, but still it is positive. Another case is if you integrate the batteries with the renewable generation plants, and here the aim is to participate ancillary service, especially not to pay too much for the imbalances of the system. And here again, an economic analysis, economic financial cash flow actually analysis was done. And here the most important enabler will be the mechanism of the service market and the forecastability of the prices, which is not so, and there is a difference. Wind is more beneficial than photovoltaic. For behind
Antonio,
the meter,
I'm sorry, I'm afraid I need to ask you to wrap up now, because already a bit over time, and to be fair to the other presenters.
Some use cases also for individual and energy communities and for local small batteries. Fast reserve is an important service, very important for us. It has already been touched up by previous speakers, but this is specific from batteries. No other mean can give to grid operators what was given by the mechanical inertia we had until a few years ago. And you will find in the slide set some data about the experience in Italy, both for power intensive and energy intensive. And one point actually important is that actually the storage is something which can be complementary with interconnections and demand response if we go at a larger scale, because for example photovoltaic production goes along the time zone shifting of the solar radiation, and so it depends on economics. And for example, if you have land connection which are not so expensive like marine submarine cables, it may be more convenient to have a bulk interconnection rather than bulk storage. And in SIGRE we are performing specific studies on this by a working group. If we are interested, we can give more details. Some consideration about applicability to MENA area. First of all, there are environmental conditions because the battery's performance is highly dependent on temperature. And just as a wrap up, in case of integrated utility with centralized planning, it can be more easy to find a positive business case for grid scale batteries. And then there are many places where microgrids and off-grids can benefit. Of course, there the business case is much higher for storage. Last but not least, exploiting technical and regulatory experiences of early adopters like in Europe can be very good to learn from lesson learned. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Antonio. I already see a lot of questions coming in to Antonio and also to the previous presentations. So it's planned to have a Q&A session at the end of all presentations. So please continue to send in your questions, and we will try to cover as many as possible after we have heard all the presenters. So the next speaker I'm proud to announce is Dr. Imran Zayed. Imran is the head of industrial power solutions and energy storage at Enerware from the Emirates, which is a true regional pioneer in distributed storage. He's with Enerware. Hello?
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry.
Can you hear me?
I was not done yet. You have an impressive CV I'd like to share. He's with Enerware Sustainable Energy since December 2016 and has led the deployment of around 12 megawatt hours of storage projects in the Middle East in 2020 across different applications, from grid connected systems also to off-grid systems, as we've heard is a very important application in the Middle East. And Imran is mainly involved in techno-economic modeling and evaluation of different scenarios of grid operation, considering storage and renewables. And this is a goal to identify the right storage technology that will deliver the best return on investment while meeting the required technical criteria. And right now he's focusing on the simulation of microgrid operation economics. In this presentation, Imran will cover the off-grid side of things in energy storage, which can be an attractive field to be active in if you do it right. So Imran, very curious to hear your presentation.
Thank you, Florian, for the introduction. Can you see my screen? Just want to make sure everybody can see my screen.
Yes.
Yeah. So as I mean, we've had quite a few interesting presentations over the last hour, right? So we're giving a very nice overview of where storage is, and we're very much all aligned on the fact that storage is going to be critical for the future, and it's going to be a critical part of what we're going to be doing over the next few years. So I'm going to initially start off with why energy storage today, why the excitement. I'll keep that very brief because I think we've had a lot of conversation on why the excitement over the last hour. Talk a little bit about the details of an energy storage system, what's inside, right? We keep talking about ESS, 10 megawatt hours, 12 megawatt hours, 100 megawatt hours, but what actually goes into putting it together, one of those units. Then I'll talk a little bit about energy storage at Enerware, the journey so far, what we've done and accomplished in the last 3 years, and what we've learned from those projects, and what are we going to do in the MENA region with storage in the coming years, right? I'll keep this quite brief, right? Essentially, we all know energy storage is growing quite fast over the world, all across the globe, and a massive reason for that is the growth in renewables, right? Renewables, especially with the drop in PV costs, and even wind, etc., are growing really fast. And being intermittent in nature, you're going to have issues with the grid and stability of the grid unless you have a way to store this energy and to control it. And what I have over here on the bottom left corner is essentially what I want to say is we're having the same problems on an off-grid system much earlier than what you're seeing on the grid system, right? The curve you see on the lower left is an actual off-grid site, not very big, around 200 kilowatts that we are currently operating, right? You can see the solar, which is the blue line, is actually at the load curve, and the load curve itself is quite peaky because they have these big baling machines, and on top of that, we also have very highly intermittent solar energy on there, right? So how do you control this, or how do you manage the system is sort of the question that we're trying to solve, and we've already hit that problem 2 years ago at Enerware because the scale of our systems are smaller and the economics are a lot more attractive because diesel-based power is a lot more expensive than grid-based power, right? We're talking about 3 to 4 times the price per kilowatt hour as compared to what you would see, what you would get priced at from the grid. So that's sort of the question of where we are right now. Around the UAE, there's multiple projects that's actually happened. We've done the biggest one, of course, that you'll hear is in Abu Dhabi. That's a 740 kilowatt hour, 648 megawatt hour system. That's the Abu Dhabi grid. That's a sodium sulfide based system that's been put across the Abu Dhabi grid. Other than that, we've got Enerware's been involved in a bunch of 100 kilowatt hour to 2 megawatt hour systems, and the biggest system that we actually put together was an 8 megawatt hour system in Dubai. So the idea behind this is there's a bunch of pilot systems that are going around in different places. Some of them are off-grid that are being done by Enerware, and some of them are pilot projects that are being tried by utilities around here, like Diva. We're right now putting together a project in Sharjah for BIA. So there's a bunch of these utilities and government-owned entities that are looking at pilot projects, and that's the stage, or that's the level we're at. And I think we're at a stage where we're ready to boom on that front. But the idea is there's a few projects around the UAE, and I think this will only continue to grow. Okay, what goes into an energy storage system, right? This is a very basic question. So when you say ESS or energy storage system, there's 3 or 4 different components to it. The first part is the battery racks, right? So these are mostly today lithium based, might change in the future, but right now mostly at least 90% of the systems that are being talked about, or that most of the people are talking about, are lithium based. Partly because of the growth or the explosion, I would say, in electric mobility, and the drop in prices of storage that's come along with it, and the improvement in technology. So what you have is you have a battery rack. That's basically, for people who are more familiar with PV, it's basically like you're putting together a bunch of battery racks, stringing them together, reaching a higher voltage level of, let's say, 500, 600 volts up to 1000 volts, and you have that battery rack module, right? This is a purely DC system that's got a battery management system sitting on top that manages the voltage balance, cell balancing, and the temperatures of those cells within that system. Now you've got to take that DC system and you've got to connect it to the grid, right? So what comes in between that is essentially you've got the PCS. Just like you have a solar PV inverter, you will have a power conversion system that's a bi-directional inverter that's going to have the DC voltage on the DC racks connected on one end, and you're going to have AC power on the other side. What's very critical in this region especially, and I saw that in one of the presentations, is the temperature of the region, right? The lithium batteries are not very happy with the temperature goes high. So what's very critical for the systems in this region are the HVAC systems that you put on them, right? So that's a very critical part of storage, especially in this region. And on top of that, you have the energy management system. What does the energy management system do? You need somebody to communicate between your PCS, between your BMS, between solar inverters if they're available on that grid, and between diesel generators if they're also on that grid. If you have the grid, the actual grid also, you need some communication between all these. So somebody needs to be sitting on top as a brain, talking to your battery and asking it to charge, to discharge, to form the grid, to transition between the grid or off grid, etc., and make those decisions. And that's where the EMS comes on top of it. That's an overview of essentially what you have there. Now, who are the players sort of between, and each of these is different players. I think that's one of the complexities of this ESS market. If you go into it a little bit deeper, the people who produce the cells are not necessarily the ones who package it. So you've got people who actually produce the cells, like the Panasonics, the Samsungs, and then you've got sometimes they do package it themselves, but you have other players like Alpha ESS, etc., who buy these cells and package them, and they're willing to sell you a battery rack with the BMS. Or then you've got some other players who then buy battery racks with BMS, put PACS together with it, integrate it in a container and sell it to you. And then you've got other players who can also give you the EMS. So it's a mix of different players combine different parts or different portions of these things, of these elements. And as a user, or even as a grid, or as a player in this market, you have to sort of decide where do you want to play and what your expertise is, right? Are you going to go into cell manufacturing? Maybe not. Are you going to do the integration locally? Are you going to buy a fully integrated system from China or elsewhere and develop the software yourself? Or are you going to just outsource the whole thing? So you need to sort of decide, especially in this region, because there isn't a lot of expertise. You need to decide where you're playing at. And as anywhere where we've decided to play at, and I'll come to why we've decided to do that, is we've decided to be an integrator locally because of the experiences we've had, wherein we're not, of course, we're going to be buying battery racks with BMS from other suppliers and buying PCS from suppliers and integrating that locally here with the software on top of it. Why did we come to that conclusion? I'm just going to take you through a quick timeline of some of the projects we've done and some of the key takeaways that we learned as one of the early adopters in this region. And some of the examples I've mentioned here were also in the DII report that was mentioned earlier. So if you actually read that report, you'll see some of these examples and some of the details in there, right? So we started off in 2017. Getting the first Tesla power pack in the Middle East, right? It was a small off-grid project, 100 kilowatt, 200 kilowatt hours. I will go into details of how the battery is operating, but some of the key things that we learned at that point of time is there aren't too many energy management systems on the globally available that can actually easily integrate in a technology agnostic manner, right? If I want to put together a diesel generator with any solar inverter with a Tesla battery, I cannot simply go out there and find something off the shelf. So we had to develop the first EMS ourselves locally to build that system. We established a reference for Tesla power pack system in this region, understood how the weather impacts it, what are the takeaways in terms of round trip efficiencies, etc. So that's our first learning experience. We bought a fully packaged system. In 2018, 2019, we bought the first LFP based system from China, which is sort of the other end of the Tesla, right? The Tesla spectrum. You go to the east and you buy a fully integrated lithium iron phosphate system. The system's operating well, but some of the key takeaways we learned was about when you buy a fully integrated system from elsewhere, not everybody clearly understands the local constraints in terms of weather and temperature, right? We've had problems with cooling, we've had problems with container quality, etc. But the battery systems themselves are okay, but people do not really understand the weather patterns here and how hot it gets, right? If you put a battery system, and this is a battery that's sitting in the middle of the Al Dhafra region in Abu Dhabi, right under the sun in the desert, right? So we got to first look at how the BMS and PCS functionalities work and what the EMS capabilities were, and they weren't really suited to what we needed. If you want to run a very optimal off-grid system, the EMS that you could get with the battery system was not sufficient. In 2020, we've then moved into one critical aspect that's actually a market in this region, is replacing lead acid based systems with lithium batteries, right? So we did a 2.2 megawatt hour system for some border towers where they've been historically running for the last 20 years on lead acid, but that fail every 1 to 2 years because of the weather conditions, right? If you have a cool lithium system, you can give the users a much longer warranty on the systems and a much better performance. So we did that project. We're doing one project that's 1 megawatt hours using Tesla power packs that's got demand flexibility in there. So here we built a controller that essentially that essentially monitors the load and switches loads on and off based on what the battery capacity is and what the solar is. And what we also launched is NStore, which is based on the experience we've had over the last 3 years, we decided that the best way to go about storage in this region is to also package it locally, right? Because you find a lot of containerization experts in this region who understand the local conditions very well and who know how to package a system. And we trialed a pilot 50 kilowatt hour system that was built, that brought together different components from different parts and actually was containerized here, with the software also being supplied by Enerware. I'll go through a couple of examples quickly. I know we don't have a lot of time. So this is the first battery that we talked about, right? 100 kilowatt, 200 kilowatt hour system that's right now operating on an industrial facility in Sharjah. It's a very nice view into what you will see in the grid on a much smaller scale, right? It's the same load graph that I showed you earlier. You can see on the 23rd of Jan, we actually had the batteries running along with the solar, right? This is a very small system with not big generators, right? So the stability or the frequency of the system is not very stable because the client has machines that have a peak of maybe 100 kilowatts in 1 second, right? So they have these baling machines that go on and off very, very frequently. As a result, what happens is the system frequency also keeps going it fluctuates between 49 to 51, right? Which is quite big for a small system. Now what you'll see is on the 23rd of Jan, we have the batteries operating, and you can see the system frequency, which is the orange line, is quite stable, right? Because batteries, you can see, are soaking up the extra solar despite all that peakiness on both the solar and the loads, and they're maintaining the frequency quite strongly. On the 26th of Jan, we actually had a problem with the batteries, so the batteries were out of functioning. We had to curtail the solar down quite a bit to make sure that they're at least a few tens of kilowatts below the load, so that you don't have problems. And you could see the system frequency is completely off the charts, right? You could see that it's fluctuating between 49 and 51. So this is a very standard or a nice example that I like to give for the batteries to show the advantage that it brings to a system, especially an off-grid system that has very high variations or fluctuations. The second example is in 2020 is the 50 kilowatt hour battery system that I'm talking about, which we packaged locally here. You can see the container in the picture, where we've got the PCS in one compartment, the storage unit in another compartment, and the controller we have actually talks to the BMS and the PCS separately. The generators are sitting behind, and there's also a solar plant on the left. This is a very small pilot. The load is around 50 to 100 kilowatts, and you can see in the two graphs below essentially the two functions here, right? When the solar is greater than the load, we charge the extra solar in the batteries, and we run through the night. And you can see on both the graphs, at night we essentially switch off the solar almost completely. To be quick, one key thing that we have to keep in mind.
Apologies also, I also again remind you please maybe to wrap up now. Okay, thanks.
This one key learning here is also the temperature derating on the PCS sides that we need to keep in mind, which is a problem we faced, right? Because the batteries, you can of course put a very nice air conditioner and they're cool, but the PCS is usually meant to be sitting in ambient, in an enclosed environment, but it's got free airflow cooling, right? And that's sometimes a problem in this region because you will find derating to be a problem. So you need to size your PCS carefully and you need to make sure that it's running properly. Quickly finishing up, what we're doing in 2021 and beyond is we're trying to launch, because I think we have enough experience in this region, at least for the MENA region. We have products on the storage end that we're launching out for customers who are interested in solutions for off-grid or even on-grid solutions where we're containerizing it locally. Main reason behind this is we realize there is a real gap in this market where somebody wants to use batteries or wants to set up systems using storage, especially on the C&I scale, but they do not have access to the suppliers directly or do not have the expertise in-house to build these systems. So we're offering a system where we're supplying battery systems along with controllers, and the applications can be very flexible and very varied depending on what the client is doing, right? We've done demand response with a few clients, and we've done a bunch of different applications. That's what we're looking at. We're trying to launch some products in the local market, especially the C&I scale. And one of the first products that actually is underway right now is a project is quite interesting. Hopefully in the next webinar, I'll give you some examples. It's combining solar system with generators, with our ESS, and also an Azilio thermal energy storage system. So all this together is going to supply a load. It's an off-grid system. This is one of the projects that's actually underway right now. We just received the PCS today, and hopefully in the next webinar I'll give you some real examples. But I think these are sort of some of the main things that we've been doing over the last 3 or 4 years, and we do see a very massive surge in demand for storage in the last 6 months. And in this region, I think we've been developing a product that can sort of cater to specific clients. Yeah. Sorry if I went over time.
Thank you very much, Imran. That was very insightful. I'm sure there will be a lot of questions and fruitful discussions later on in the Q&A section of that panel. For now, I would like to introduce the next speaker. That's Mr. Amit Kumar Beria. He's a Senior Manager, Energy Storage, Techno-Commercial at Aqua Power. Amit specializes in energy storage with over 13 years of experience working on energy storage systems based not only on lithium-ion batteries, but also redox flow batteries, hydrogen, and fuel cells. So he has worked in a variety of functions, including fundamental material research, system and application engineering, value proposition analysis, and market studies, as well as business development. And as an energy engineer by training, he contributed multiple patents and research articles in the field of fuel cells and batteries. So Amit, stage is yours.
Thank you, Florian. Okay, so yeah, I'll try to keep the presentation short, and let's spend some time during the Q&A session for further discussions. So essentially, the topic I've chosen is, again, relevant to the conference's energy storage basis relevance for the MENA region. Before we dive into the topic, let me introduce my company, Aqua Power. So we are in the business of electricity and water desalination with over 63 assets combining a total power base of about 43 gigawatt and water desalination about 6 million cubic meter per day. And we started in 2004 based out of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and presently operational in over 13 countries. So some of the topics might already be covered by the previous presenters, so I'll try to keep those short and skip. Essentially, again, as Dr. Imran covered, that there are three major, let's say, parts of the battery storage. The battery in itself, which is the electrochemical storage device, then the power conversion part, which although in terms of cost might be a very small component of the overall BESS system, but very, very important to give the flexibility and the performance that is needed for a BESS. And then the third part is, let's say, the grid integration and the control system overall. And primarily battery storage, why it serves as the flexibility for the grid, or why it is said to be the holy grail of renewable energy, is because it can perform in a dual role. It can act as a load. At the same time, it can act as a generator. So the grid operators have a lot of flexibility. And hence, energy storage finds its application throughout the electricity value chain, starting from generation all the way till the end consumer as a demand management tool. So in my slides, I like to focus on the generation side, especially the front of the meter utility applications, because that's where Aqua Power's business interest lies in. So now, if we look at the current status in MENA region overall, most of the countries have set very high renewable energy targets, and solar PV in this region is like one of the fastest growing renewable energy technology. There are multiple reasons. The cost, the engineering is relatively simpler, and the cost of capital is low, and so on and so forth, many other things. So, and if you look at some of the countries here, like Kingdom Saudi Arabia has a target of 58 gigawatt, even UAE has 44% as a target of renewables in its energy mix. Morocco has over 50%, and such high penetration of renewables is something which, let's say, makes flexibility to be built into the power system, and that's where the role of battery energy storage comes in, which again was a reiteration of what most of the speakers in the previous session spoke about. Again, the challenges, maybe I can skip this slide because it's covered already. It's about the ramp rate, the infirmness, which is like globally the same situation, right? But specifically to the MENA region, let's see what really happens if the renewable targets are really achieved by most of these countries. So Antonio in his session introduced the California duck curve, right, where let's say with a non-solar being a part of, with solar not being part of a renewable energy mix of the total energy mix, still, let's say in 2012, there was an evening peak observed by the California grid, right? And the second peak which was observed was during the daytime. And as more and more PV was added, the daytime load was decreasing and the evening peak was still unmet. So the ramp that was required by power generation sources which are not PV had to have a very significant ramp rate. Now, if we try to just an example, I picked the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia from the MENA region, and if you see the load curve, it's the peak of the load happens during the daytime, and that's when the PV generation also happens, right? But if the targets that are set by the kingdom are really met, then if you see the plot or the graph on the right hand side, the blue curve is the load curve without any PV added to it, and the orange one is the, let's say, with the target being achieved of the PV of the overall renewable generation in the energy mix, then the effective load which need to be handled by the conventional power plants will be something shown in the green curve here. So which shows that during the last 2 to 3 hours of duration in the evening, the ramp rate required will be very, very high, and which after a certain point would be difficult for the conventional power plants as well to manage. And that's where, energy storage in terms of the ramp rate control or energy shifting makes sense even for the MENA region. Of course, it's a question that whether the situation demands introduction of energy storage now already, or is it like 10 years later when the targets set by the various countries are really achieved or met. So even on this question, our view is that if such an introduction is made, so one thing is inevitable that battery energy storage needs to be introduced if such high targets of energy storage of renewables have to be met. And our view says is that if co-location of energy storage is done with PV, then a lot of asset utilization, common asset utilization can be done for utility scale projects. The substations, the transmission lines, all of those can be commonized, and hence the effective cost of energy storage can be reduced by coupling at the DC level or coupling at a medium voltage level between PV and BESS. And hence, looking at a futuristic scenario, it might be prudent for the regulators or the utilities to start introducing such flexibilities, looking at a future scenario corresponding to the targets that are being set by the various countries in the region. The next is again smoothing and inertia. I'll keep it short because it is just a repetition of the previous presenters, that as more and more inverter-based technologies like PV are introduced, on one hand, the proportion of the rotating mass or the proportion of the synchronous generators are being reduced. So that means inertia is reduced, and at the same time, the variability is introduced more and more. And hence that also brings in a case of storage. Next is the capacity factor, that although the proportion of renewable sources are very less at utility scale presently, but as more and more of them are added, we know the capacity factor of a PV standalone is much lesser, which means that transmission capacity utilization is very less. And hence, as a stacked value, energy storage can not only help in managing the ramp rate, not only the variability, but also in increasing the utilization of the transmission capacity. That's another point. And finally, let's say these are the 3 major applications or use cases which we see for at least utility scale projects. Of course, there are many others, but these are the 3 primary ones for this region which should be looked at while formulating the regulations, or while formulating what kind of energy storage is needed or not needed for the new upcoming PV plants, let's say. And in terms of optimization, again, for a, let's say, behind the meter application, there could be many other things, but at least for the utility scale, there is no one size fit all kind of a solution. The size of a BESS for any given size of PV would depend on many parameters, and the optimization really needs to be done. And some of the factors that we think at utility scale matters are the dispatch profile of the local grid, which can differ from one country to another or one region to another. The capacity factor requirement, what are the target LCOE? So let's say PV standalone is much cheaper. It's even cheaper than the incremental cost of the fuel, right, for coal, let's say. But as we add on storage, the relative LCOE would go on increasing, because BESS does not generate on its own. It's a cost at the end of the day. So the choice has to be made that while the overall integrated LCOE still remains lower than the incremental cost of thermal power plants, but still the benefits can be added, so that the proportion of renewable sources in the energy mix can be finally increased. Some of the other points could be the grid stability study of the region in terms of the PV size and what should be the best power and energy capacity that needs to be added. And on top, in order to achieve any particular dispatch profile, the PV or the wind might require oversizing compared to the dispatch limitation, right? So then the land availability also becomes a factor in terms of optimizing the best size, whether there is enough land available to oversize PV so that the transmission capacity is still not breached and the capacity factor can still be increased. So with this, I mean, essentially the takeaways are BESS is like fast and flexible. It has a dual role of behaving as a load as well as a source at the same time, and the grid operator can use it, and hence it finds its application in the entire value chain, starting right from the generation till the end use residential applications. And in order to increase the proportion of the lowest cost of energy, let's say PV, BESS becomes inevitable, and while still remaining lower than other alternative production thermal power plants in the region. And BESS already, as again mentioned by some of the previous speakers, that already has a significant performance track record globally at much larger scale, and with probably a cumulative deployment of over 6 gigawatt-hour or so of just electrochemical energy storage. So yeah, so with this, I think I wrap up my presentation and we can discuss more during the Q&A session.
Yeah, thank you very much. That was almost on spot 10 minutes. Thank you very much for being so disciplined. And yeah, obviously a very interesting presentation. I'm very looking forward to discuss in the Q&A session. We have one last speaker. I'm happy to announce now, Dr. Thomas Hager. Thomas is the director of Future Energy Storage Solutions International at the German-based Hager Group, known, at least to me, particular for owning one of the leading residential storage companies, which is E3DC. Prior to joining Hager, Thomas was a research associate with the Energy Research Center of Lower Saxony, as well as Institute of Electrical Power Engineering and Energy Systems, where he focused on state estimation and simulation of gas distribution grids. He holds a PhD degree in energy system technology and will speak today on energy storage systems as a game changer on the global energy transition. And I could imagine that residential storage will be a part of this, right, Thorsten?
Exactly, Florian. Many thanks for your kind introduction, and let me directly jump in my presentation about the energy storage system and their contribution to the global energy transition. And my presentation and my talk is more focused on the small scale behind the meter system, mainly on residential application, and let's directly have a look on these systems. Now my screen is working. The first question I would like to give you an idea is, why do the systems, the customers, and at the end of the day, the end customers invest in such small scale systems? And in Europe, especially in Germany, we can see that the main driver for them is the contribution to energy transition. So they want to contribute to making the world more green and sustainable. So these ecological reasons are one of the key drivers, followed by cost savings, by becoming more independent from increasing energy bills year by year. Somehow in line with this, you have the wish for some autarky, to be independent from anybody else. And last but not least, of course, you can see that some of the people would like to invest in their buildings, in their houses, and to invest their money to get a return on invest. But that's a weaker driver compared to the three others. But these are the drivers we have seen in the past mainly. And these drivers are, especially if you have a look on autarky and so on, all of this is really focused on the building owner, on the individual itself, but not contributing that much to the system stability and to the energy system in total and to energy transition at the end of the day. But if we have a look on new use cases, which are popping up more and more and are implemented in kind of field tests, but also in some first market introductions for early adopters and so on, you can see use cases like local energy markets. For example, I would like to sell my PV energy to my neighbor, or to my kids, or to someone else I know, to my friends somewhere in my region, or sometimes also on higher distances as well. Another use case is the ancillary services which could be provided to the grid operators by these kind of storage systems. We've heard a lot about it in the presentations before. There it was mainly focused on utility scale systems, container systems. But nevertheless, you can do the same with a small system as well. And the advantage of small system is, first, you produce your energy where you are consuming it, but you're also storing it where you are consuming it at the end of the day. Means you can reduce the grid transmissions dramatically. And by providing grid services, you can also prevent the issues which are popping up directly locally, and though you don't have to do it over regions. And the third use case in this direction is the overload protection. And here you have to see two different types of overload protections. The first one is in the building itself to avoid the tripping of the main fuse due to too high loads. This use case popped up, in fact, together with e-mobility, because here you are with the chargers for electric vehicles with 22 kilowatt, or even if it's 11 kilowatt, but you have two of them or maybe three of them in the future. You would face some issues with your grid connection, and to boost your grid connection, the idea is really on the one hand side to use the battery to boost it, and on the other hand side to use your energy management to control the battery in your vehicle, which is nothing else in this case like a flexible load, or what we are also seeing in our work and in our product development is to use it as a mobile storage, as we call it, by using it as a bidirectional. By using bidirectional chargers to charge and discharge the battery of the car as well. But outside of the building, you have the same in your cable in the street. Also there you have the situations of overloading it. So here the flexibilities which could be provided by the stationary storage systems in the buildings are helping to provide these or to prevent these overloads. And you can do it directly in the street by directly acting on the cable, and you have no over-regional stuff to handle and to manage. So it's really on the place you need it. So these are the future topics, and these are the things which are really contributing and making the storage system a game changer for energy transition. And now, how does it look in a bit more in detail? On the left-hand side, you can see the building with the photovoltaic system. I spoke about the electric vehicle, in future bidirectional, charged and discharged. You have the heating system, electric heating system, of course, in this context. You have the energy storage as well. And over all of this, and that's somehow the brain of all what we are talking about, because all these single devices for themselves, they don't bring that much added value. But the energy management on top of it, orchestrating all of them and bringing the link to the grid operators to provide the grid services as well as to the energy markets to offer the energy, but also the flexibilities to these external players, they make a big difference. If we have a look on the storage capacities itself, we are talking in Germany about a system size of 10 to maybe 20 kilowatt hours in average, something like this. It's compared to the megawatt hours system or gigawatt hours storage systems. It's a little piece only, and it's very, very small. But you can imagine if you connect thousands or millions of households together via communication system, via the energy management system, then you have a huge fleet or swarm of storage systems which could be controlled and which could contribute with its own flexibility to the total stabilization of the system. And that's the idea behind the energy storage systems locally. To give you an idea what we are doing as Hager Group with our brand E3DC, you can see on the left-hand side the map of Germany, Switzerland and Austria, with all the green and orange dots and also the white ones. So all the dots on the graphics are storage systems in operation. Today, more than 50,000 systems installed and in operation. And yeah, that's a certain amount of storage capacity. So we're talking about more than 500 megawatt hours, which are installed. But besides this technical facts, you have another topic which should be considered in all of this. It's really the contribution of the people itself. So in the middle, you can see the autarky level in the month of April this year. Over all systems, we had, or the customers, they had the autarky level of 74%, means they only consume 26% of their electricity from the grid operator. But that's what we as a company are providing, or what we are sharing a little bit in the social media. But at the bottom, you can see it in this small screenshot that each, or not each, but a lot of end customers are contributing to this and are really proud to their contribution, and they share their autarky level. And some complain that they did not reach the average level, they were under average because of this and that, and maybe they have some issues and they are checking and so on. Others are coming in and are very proud of their own contribution and posting stuff like, oh, I am at 80%, also including charging my electric vehicle. So great month for me. So you see, you are activating the people itself to contribute to energy transition as well, which is another very, very important brick in making energy transition, bringing energy transition to life. And on the right-hand side, I just would like to give you 3 examples how it could look like and what the systems are looking like we are really doing. And so you see real installations. The first thing is an apartment building with 16 units, and you have electric vehicle chargers outdoor at the car parking, but also the battery storage systems in the cellar to provide or to store the PV energy from the rooftop and to provide it to the chargers, but also to the building itself. The typical installation is in detached houses or villas, really to use the locally generated PV in the house, but also small commercial systems like here in the motorcycle dealership. You can see on the picture here where we have installed a larger system to increase self-consumption autarky as well. So these are examples from Germany, from Europe. But last but not least, I would like to transfer this a little bit to the MENA region by showing you some simulations of an installation in Dubai, where we were talking about a very comparable small PV with only 6.5 kilowatt peak, connected to our storage system with 19 kilowatt hours, 9 kilowatt battery charger. And you can see all the curves for 1 day in January, for 1 day in July. And I don't want to go too much in all the diagrams here, but at the end of the day, you can see that the self-consumption of PV is close to 100% at both days. But also the autarky level, which could be reached, is 64% in January and 37% in July. But what's interesting, if you're talking about contribution to grid stability and to grid management, you can see on the diagram in the middle, it's the state of energy of the storage system. And you can see between midnight to midnight that it starts to charge, and it will in January, we are coming close to 100% state of charge with the system. But all the time around, you have a lot of flexibility where you could also store energy from external PV, or from, let's say it's more general, from the grid, and could use it or discharge it during the day or at least in the early morning hours to provide some energy here. And also here during this time, the energy, you could play much more with the grid. And in summer times, it's even more, you can play with the battery storage to support the local energy storage of renewables. So that's it, a quick outlook what we are doing, or a quick overview what we are doing in Europe, and how we see the world at the moment in the Middle East. And yeah, I'm looking forward to our discussions now in the panel discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Thorsten. So we now also covered the residential storage side of things. Yeah, we have probably 10 minutes for answering or discussing some of the questions I received, which were plenty. Are the other panelists still here? Great. So I think I tried also to cluster the questions a bit, and I think a lot of questions related to the different storage technologies, because we were talking a lot about batteries here, but obviously there are a lot of different storage technologies, also mechanical or thermal storage. And even within the different categories, such as lithium-ion batteries, there are different chemistries which could also be of different suitability for the particular conditions in the MENA region, and particular ambient temperatures. So what's your view on that? Who would like to give his perspective on the question? Maybe you, Imran. I mean, you've dealt with at least thermal and lithium-ion batteries. Some practical experience.
Exactly. I think right now the way the market is, I think lithium is still leading. Because I think the number of gigafactories that are setting up, the costs are dropping quite dramatically. But we have been in conversations. It's a question between lithium-ion NMC versus lithium-ion phosphate, right? I mean, that's sort of seems to be the debate within. And we've seen advantages and disadvantages of both. But we've been sort of leaning towards LFP in this region because it's also more thermally stable as compared to NMC, and that's sort of maybe sometimes critical in the UAE where the weather is sort of not exactly amicable, but it's slightly bulkier, right? But in terms of technologies beyond that, we have had conversations with, there's a few suppliers out there, right? There's I think EOS that's doing a zinc-based solution. We're now implementing a thermal storage from Azilio, but they're still not at the production scale or at the scale where they're still at a pilot stage. Whereas I would say lithium is already sort of building 100 megawatt-hour systems across. I'm not saying lithium is going to be the future for the next 2 decades, but I think for the next 2 or 3 years, I think lithium is going to dominate until some of these newer or more interesting or exciting concepts sort of find their foothold and increase production. And it's going to be a constant battle between, I think, LFP versus NMC sort of until then.
And are there any limitations given the high temperatures you're facing in the MENA region? Any technology?
I mean, the limitations, of course, you lose a little bit more energy in the auxiliary service of cooling it. It's just that you have to be a little bit more careful or keep a closer eye on the temperature within those cabinets, right? Ensure that the air conditioning is working all the time. With Tesla, it's a liquid cool system. It operates pretty well. But if you're containerizing it locally, you need to have a very keen eye on, is the temperature going up in there? You need to have alarms to make sure you're not letting the temperature rise, which is also why to an extent, we prefer LFP, because the dangers of overheating are smaller for LFP, at least as far as we know, when compared to the rest. But it's just that you need to make sure you're designing the systems right.
Right. Okay. And then on a utility scale, I mean, some of the attendees asking questions about compressed air energy storage, or also a concentrated solar power, which is also very often combined with the thermal storage unit. Any ideas on that?
So for compressed air, I've had a couple of conversations with I know there's a research project happening in Sharjah on compressed air. Again, as I said, it's still early stage, but something that's kind of exciting. I think there's a couple of companies that are working on it, is trying to use compressed air and storing them in caverns that were used for natural gas, right? The naturally available caverns under the ground. I know there's a couple of research projects around that, but I haven't, and I know there's been some talk about that even in this region. It's with a professor based in Sharjah, but that's an interesting concept. But again, it's a concept, right? That still needs to be, it's been proven on a small scale, I think, in a lab, but it's the question of scaling that up, and that will take some time. And in terms of, I think that was compressed air. The second question was on CSP. CSP, I think, was quite exciting 7 or 8 years ago. It still is to a large extent, but the massive drop in prices for PV and for regular lithium-based storage is, I would say, is driving that a little bit, or putting a stop to an extent to that kind of storage, right? I think we're going to see less and less of those, because you need a lot of conditions that need to go right for those systems. But CSP I'm seeing a little less buzz on that front as compared to 7 years ago, right? But the technology is there. I think one of the largest storage projects in Dubai is essentially the Mohammed bin Rashid Park CSP plant that's being put together, right? And I know they're also supplementing that with regular PV. So yeah, I see a lesser buzz, but I don't want to completely write anything off, right? You don't know what's going to happen.
Thank you. There are also some questions around application in MENA. There were a few also related to use cases we haven't stressed too much in the presentations. For example, grid related to grid lines. So for example, virtual transmission lines as they are piloted, for example, in France and Germany right now. Maybe Antonio, that's one for you. Do you see big potential here in the MENA region?
You mean for utility scale grid application? Probably more than residential, because I think residential is still very much linked to the tariffs. For example, the examples we have in Italy, but I think in Germany was not so different, is the saving of the consumer is more on the tariff because of tariffication and all what you pay in the bill, which is not directly related to the energy itself. Instead, for MENA, what I see is for the best exploitation of grid scale, you still need to have a quite developed grid, a minimal threshold of meshed grids, let's say, and then you can best exploit the possibilities of the batteries. So maybe the best actually would be a coordinated planning of renewable. If you have a huge plans for developing renewables, and you can coordinate since the planning phase, even the design phase of which storage for which services and for which location. I think that this can give the best advantages for the system, and the system means all the consumer, because in the end the system costs are in the bills.
Understood. Well, would you agree, Torsten, to Antonio's assessment of behind the meter or residential storage in the MENA region?
Yeah, basically it's right. The tariffs are one of the drivers, and this will not be the driver in the MENA region. But nevertheless, you will see people which are willing to contribute to green energy, to energy transition, and these people are not focused on return on investment, on financial profitability. They would like to make their own contribution, and therefore they would like to use their rooftop. They are also willing to invest some money, because even in Germany, the return on invest of an PV with a storage system is not 5-6 years. We are talking more about 10 years return on invest. So it's nothing, or it's not the main driver to do it for this reason. It's a supporting one, but the main driver is really this ecological. And I think this is a driver which is valid everywhere in the world. And as long as the people are having the money to do investments, I think you will find a place to do it in storage system as well, also behind the meter segment in MENA region.
Yeah, that's
very
interesting. Yeah, sorry,
yes.
Go ahead.
If I can react to this, sometimes the feeling of the people, the final consumer, that is doing something for the good, green, sustainable future energy system has to be seen. Sometimes it is used as an advertisement also by some companies, some trends, because installing a battery in your house does not directly enhance the sustainability of the system. It's the whole. It has to be seen under a system approach. What is the aim, and which are the alternatives to reach the same aim? In this respect, I like very much the Irena, the Carlos presentation of the assessment of the cases versus there was a strong and important step there, that every project is assessed against the alternatives which are there to reach the same results, and both economically but also in a system approach. And I think this is important because it's a very complex system. We have many ways to arrive to the goal on which we all agree, which is decarbonization and sustainability.
Agree, and I think sustainability is a very important aspect. Some questions were around that as well, and maybe this is the last question I would like to cover before, unfortunately, I already have to hand over back to Mohamed again for the closing remarks. But sustainability in the sense of green batteries. I mean, this is a topic I'm hearing a lot because public scrutiny on the whole battery value chain is increasing, and people are increasingly challenging the energy storage industry. Are you really that green? Given that there are still difficulties in recycling, there are all these issues around mining of raw materials, high energy intensive processes in the battery manufacturing. Maybe Amit, do you have a perspective on that?
Yes, so I think, Florian, essentially most of the time, if you see, there are two topics which comes up in terms of, let's say, the greenness of the battery in itself. One is on the mining side of the raw materials, primarily for cobalt, let's say, and second is in terms of recycling. So in terms of mining, again, yes, there has been a lot of awareness being generated that mining is not in a very environmentally sustainable way. And I think a lot of these industry players are trying to take care of that in terms of putting in restrictions, in terms of the raw material suppliers need to validate that the mining is done in a particular environment without violating human rights or environmental situations. Plus, on top of that, I think in terms of stationary energy storage, as Dr. Imran said, that currently we see a lot of movement towards lithium ferrophosphate as a technology of choice compared to NCM. Even Tesla recently announced that they would move their basic chemistry from cobalt-based to lithium ferrophosphate. So I think that's one aspect there. And second, on the recycling, I think on the concern on recycling is not so much on the technology in itself. I think compared to the portable electronics, there is a lot of recycling technology as well as industries being set up. It's just about mandating recycling as a part of the projects because technology exists, the supply chain exists. It's just about making it a mandate that whatever projects are being set up at the end of life, they need to be recycled rather than just dumping it in some dump yard. So I think there is an awareness in the industry and the concerns both at the mining side as well as the recycling side is being very well taken care of as we move forward.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, I think we are unfortunately already out of time for that Q&A session. So I would like, from my end, thank everyone, thank to the panelists, thank everyone for the great presentation, and also thanks to the audience for sending in all these great questions. I hope we covered at least a few of them. And with that, back to you, Mohammed.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Flo, for the great discussion and insightful input on the various topics there, along with the panelists during the past 1 hour. Guys, don't worry, for all of the questions that we have received, we will try as much as possible and circulate those questions to all the attendees. The colleagues on the webinar, we tried to bring you as much topics as possible related to the various technologies and dynamics related to energy storage during our webinar. We know that there are many other important topics that were not covered during our session today. Storage is shaping almost everything around our lives lately, and it is, for me as an electrical engineer and energy professional, represent the introduction of iPhone into the telecommunication. It's a new thing that really has lots of potentials and unlimited applications across everything that we do, not only to the grid where we focus today, but also to other industries like mobilities, like all of the other industries around us. The energy industry is a 100 years old industry, and currently we are facing a revolution in this industry, whether it comes from energy storage, renewable penetration and integration, or from the digital transformation into our grid. A couple of highlights that I wanted just to mention from the different sessions that we had today. We started with a great opening remarks from Dr. Saidi, Cornelius, and Daniel, talking about the stakeholders into the energy storage industry itself, the things that are needed to be set up right to enable the way and remove any road blockers that might represent risk for the spread of energy storage adoption within our region. Then we had a great session from Carlos Fernandez in electricity storage valuation framework, highlighting the importance of a coordinated approach to extract missing money, realize the overall value of deploying energy storage into the grid, and go beyond the monetized value that we can get basis, and how to compensate those through the right policies and incentives. Later, Parag Bamer, a partner at the International Battery Energy Storage Alliance, took us on a journey explaining the role of EPSA and similar organizations in enhancing and accelerating the deployment of energy storage into the energy mix, and how renewable energy will be growing hand in hand with the energy storage and its various technologies whether it's battery, it's hydro, or even energy storage through green hydrogen. Finally, Florian, thanks a lot for the exceptional panel that you moderated, where you took us in a very exciting journey with great speakers covering various topics on energy storage market development in MENA region, as well as case studies from across the world and within the region itself. You gave us lots of hope that our region is on the right track to grow this industry in the years to come, and give us some flavors on the challenges that we might face, whether it's climate-related challenges or lack of incentives and policies, where we need all to collaborate together to make sure that we pave the way and enable this industry to grow within the region. In conclusion, it's very exciting time to all of us who operate in the energy industry, and I strongly encourage all of you who are on this webinar today to join CEBC, DII, and EPCs, and be active part of our energy storage working group that will continue bringing you all new events, research, and collaboration between all stakeholders, whether they are technology providers, whether they are policymakers, governments, or even academia, within universities, R&Ds, and others, to advance the adoption of battery storage in MENA region. Thanks all for your active participation, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you all.